The doctor's hands were shaking. I watched her stare at my file, not the ultrasound screen where my baby's heartbeat flickered in black and white. No, she was staring at the paperwork, at my husband's name printed in neat letters on the top of the page. Then she turned off the monitor, just switched it off mid-exam, like someone had pulled a plug on my entire life. "Mrs. Mercer," she said, and her voice was barely a whisper. "I need to speak with you privately right now." She led me to her office, closed the door, locked it. I thought something was wrong with the baby. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. Then she said words that made my world collapse. "You need to leave your husband today. Before you go home, get a divorce lawyer first." I laughed. Actually laughed out loud. "What? Why? We're having a baby together. We're happy." "I don't understand. That's exactly the problem." Her face was white as paper. "What I'm about to show you will change everything you think you know about your marriage. But let me start from the beginning, because you need to understand how I ended up in that office, 4 months pregnant, learning my entire life was built on lies told by the man sleeping next to me every night. My name is Daphne Wilson. I'm 32 years old. I work as a marketing director at a boutique firm in Connecticut, and I come from what people politely call old money. My grandmother Eleanor passed away 5 years ago and left me her estate, about $2.3 million in a trust, plus the historic Wilson family home, where 5 generations of women had lived, loved, and raised their children. I never flaunted it. I worked hard at my own career. I drove a 10-year-old Subaru and bought my coffee at the same place every morning. The inheritance was security, not identity. But it made me a target. I just didn't know it yet. I met Grant Mercer 4 years ago at my family's annual charity gala. The Wilsons had hosted it for decades. That year, I was standing at the bar trying to escape a conversation with a man who'd asked about my financial situation within 3 minutes of meeting me. Subtle, right? Then Grant appeared. Tall, dark hair, easy smile. He asked what I was drinking, made a joke about the terrible jazz band. Didn't mention money once. He claimed to be just a financial advisor who'd gotten a last-minute invitation from a colleague. He said he had no idea who the Wilson family was. Looking back, that should have been my first red flag. A financial advisor who doesn't research the host family of a major charity event. That's like a chef showing up to a cooking competition saying, "Oh, we're making food today." Had no idea, but I was tired of obvious gold diggers. And here was this charming man asking about my favorite books instead of my bank account. We dated for a year. Grant was attentive, thoughtful, remembered the smallest details. He insisted on paying for dinners, even though I could have bought the restaurant. He seemed so genuine. My mother, Vivian, saw through him immediately. After their first meeting, she pulled me aside. "That man's smile doesn't reach his eyes," she said. "Something's wrong with him, Daphne. I can feel it." I told her she was being paranoid, overprotective, jealous even. We fought about Grant constantly. Eventually, we just stopped talking. 2 years of near silence between me and the woman who raised me. Birthday texts, and nothing more. All because I chose to believe my husband over my own mother. Spoiler alert, Mom was right. And she's been waiting patiently to say, "I told you so." At this point, she's absolutely earned it. Grant and I got married after a year of dating. Beautiful ceremony at my grandmother's estate. He cried during his vows, tears streaming down his face as he promised to love and protect me forever. Looking back, those were probably the most honest tears he ever shed, not from joy, from relief. His long game was finally paying off. After 2 years of trying for a baby naturally, we saw a fertility specialist. The diagnosis hit like a truck. Grant had severe male factor infertility. His sperm count was almost non-existent, and what little he had barely moved. Natural conception was essentially impossible. Grant seemed devastated. He cried in the car for 20 minutes. He apologized over and over like it was his personal failure. I comforted him, told him we'd figure it out together. That's what marriage was about. What I didn't know was that Grant wasn't crying from grief. He was crying because his plan had just gotten significantly more complicated. All that emotion was him recalculating, not mourning. We decided on IVF with a specialized procedure called ICSI, where doctors inject a single sperm directly into an egg. best chance. Grant insisted on researching clinics himself. Found one he said was perfect. Handled all the paperwork. At the time, I thought he was being supportive because I was so emotionally drained. The first cycle failed, devastating. I couldn't get out of bed for 3 days. Grant held me, whispered encouragement, promised we'd try again. The second cycle, 7 months ago, worked. Positive pregnancy test. 2 pink lines that changed everything. I cried happy tears. Grant held me close, already talking about nursery colors and baby names, and the future he'd always dreamed of. Then, casually, he mentioned I should update my, "Well, now that we're a family," he said. I thought it was sweet, practical, the kind of thing a good husband thinks about. I had no idea he was already counting my grandmother's money. His own. Everything seemed perfect. The loving husband, the baby on the way, the life I dreamed about since I was a little girl playing with dolls in my grandmother's garden. I had no idea that in just 3 months, a stranger with trembling hands would show me documents that would burn my perfect life to ashes. And I had no idea that the fire had been set by the man sleeping next to me every single night. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this story, please hit subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. I read every single comment, and it truly means the world to me. Now, back to the story. 4 months pregnant, and something had shifted in my marriage. Small things at first, the kind of things you notice but explain away because the alternative is too painful. To consider. Grant started keeping his phone face down on every surface. New password I didn't know. He'd step outside to take calls, come back saying it was work stuff, and change the subject before I could ask questions. He claimed he was restructuring client portfolios during these late-night calls at 11 p.m. on a Saturday. Now, I'm no financial expert, but I'm pretty sure the stock market takes weekends off, unless Grant had secret clients in Tokyo, which he definitely did not. Something else was going on. The late nights at the office multiplied. 3 times a week, sometimes 4. He wouldn't come home until midnight. He's a financial advisor, not an emergency room surgeon. What could possibly require that kind of schedule? I found receipts. A restaurant downtown I'd never been to. $280 for dinner for 2. A hotel in the city 40 minutes from our house. Why would my husband need a hotel room so close to home? When I asked, Grant had answers for everything, smooth, practiced answers that came just a little too quickly. Client dinner, important networking. The hotel was for a conference that ran late. And it just made more sense to stay over than drive home exhausted. And when I pushed harder, when I asked more questions, his tone changed. "Daphne, you're being paranoid. It's the hormones. My mother warned me about this. Women get irrational during pregnancy. Don't turn into one of those wives." I felt ashamed for even asking. That's how good he was at this. He made me apologize for questioning him. The financial pressure intensified around the same time. Grant's requests about money became more frequent, more urgent, more creative. "We should add me to your trust. What if something happens during delivery? I need to be able to access funds for the baby. It's just practical. Power of attorney is common sense. Every married couple does it. Unless you don't trust me, your grandmother's house is too big for us anyway. We should sell it. Invest the money properly. I know exactly which funds would maximize our returns." The man wanted me to sell my grandmother's home and let him invest the proceeds. This is the same man who insisted we needed 3 different streaming services because he couldn't remember which one had his shows. That's who I should trust with $2 million. Absolutely not. When I said no, gently and carefully, Grant's warmth evaporated. He became cold, distant. He started sleeping on the far edge of the bed, claiming I moved too much now that I was pregnant. The arguments became more frequent. He'd bring up the trust. I'd refuse. He'd give me the silent treatment for days. His silent treatments lasted exactly until he got hungry. Funny how that worked. Apparently, his principles had a time limit, and that limit was an empty stomach. He barely touched me anymore. Blamed my changing body. Said he didn't want to hurt the baby. It sounded caring on the surface. It felt like rejection in my bones. I tried to talk to him about it. He said I was being needy, hormonal, difficult. I started to wonder if the problem was me. One night, I woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning and Grant wasn't in bed. I found him in the kitchen, hunched over his phone, speaking in a hushed voice. I stood in the hallway and listened. "It's almost time," he was saying. "By spring, everything will be settled. Just need to wait until." He saw me and hung up immediately. "Work emergency," he said. "Go back to sleep, honey." I didn't ask who has work emergencies at 2 a.m. about things being settled by spring. I was too tired, too pregnant, too desperate to believe my marriage was still okay. My best friend, Tara, came over for lunch the following week. She sat across from me at the kitchen table and watched me make excuse after excuse for Grant, his stress, his work pressure, his adjustment to becoming a father. Finally, she put down her fork and looked at me with those eyes that had known me since college. "Daph, listen to yourself. When's the last time you talked to your mom?" I didn't answer. "When's the last time Grant was actually happy to see you? Not performing happy, not putting on a show for other people. Really genuinely happy to see you walk through the door?" I couldn't answer that either. "Trust your gut," Tara said. "Something is wrong here." I told her she was being dramatic, but that night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Grant's phone, always face down, his late nights, his sudden obsession with getting access to my money. The way he looked at me sometimes when he thought I wasn't paying attention, like I was a math problem to solve, not a person to love. 4 months pregnant. Regular OB appointment for an ultrasound. My usual doctor was on vacation, so I was scheduled with a colleague instead, Dr. Claire Brennan. I went alone. Grant had a client meeting he absolutely couldn't miss. Standard appointment, nothing special. I laid back on the exam table, cold gel on my belly, waiting to see my baby dancing on the screen like always. Dr. Brennan was pleasant and professional. She made small talk while setting up the equipment, asked how I was feeling, if the baby was moving much, all the normal questions. Then she opened my file, glanced at the paperwork, her face changed. She looked at my husband's name, looked at me, back at the name. I saw her hands start to tremble. She set down the ultrasound wand, reached over, and turned off the monitor completely. "Mrs. Mercer," she said, and her voice was barely above a whisper. "I need to speak with you privately right now." I thought something was wrong with the baby. Every worst-case scenario flooded my mind in 3 seconds flat. She walked me to her office, closed the door, locked it behind us, and then she said words that cracked my entire world wide open. "I know what your husband did, and I have proof." She pulled a folder from her desk drawer. Her hands were still shaking as she opened it. "My younger sister works at your fertility clinic," she said. 3 weeks ago, she came to me crying. She told me everything. "When I saw your husband's name on your file just now, I recognized it immediately." Dr. Brennan took a deep breath. "Mrs. Mercer, I'm so sorry. But you need to see this before you go home, before he knows that you know." She laid the folder open on her desk between us, and everything I thought I knew about my marriage, my pregnancy, and the man I loved turned to ash right in front of my eyes. Dr. Claire Brennan's younger sister, Molly, worked as a nurse at the fertility clinic, the same clinic my husband had so carefully researched for our IVF treatment, the clinic he insisted was perfect for us. Now I understood why he'd been so particular about that choice. Claire explained everything, her voice steady even though her hands weren't. 3 weeks earlier, Molly had shown up at Claire's apartment close to midnight. She was sobbing so hard she could barely speak. She hadn't been sleeping. She'd lost weight. The guilt had been eating her alive for months, and she finally couldn't carry it anymore. 7 months ago, Molly told her a patient's husband had approached her at the clinic. He was charming, well-dressed, seemed desperate, but reasonable. He said he had a special situation that required discretion. His wife didn't know, he explained, but he was using donor sperm for their IVF cycle. Some family genetic issue he didn't want to burden her with. Nothing sinister. He just needed help keeping it quiet. He'd pay well for the assistance. $30,000 for a nurse making $52,000 a year, drowning in student loans and credit card debt. It was impossible to refuse. Molly helped switch the samples. Grant's sperm, which couldn't have produced a pregnancy anyway, was replaced with sperm from a paid donor. The embryologist was in on it, too. Grant had approached him separately with another payment. Between the two of them, the switch went undetected. The embryologist told Molly not to worry. The husband knows what he's doing. It's not our business what arrangements married couples make. But it ate at Molly, especially when she saw in the clinic records that the pregnancy was successful. Somewhere out there was a woman carrying a baby.